Welcome back to On the Soul's Terms podcast. Thanks for joining us again today as we've spent some time in the fourth house down the very bottom of the chart over the last few weeks. We had an interview with Melanie Reinhardt. If you haven't listened to that, I'd highly recommend going back and having a listen. And then my own solo episode exploring the themes of that fourth house, ancestry, roots, and all of those things. And today, I've been really pondering what fairy tale would fit the fourth house. And as time has gone on, in fact, the sun has just now moved into Leo. And so I thought it'd be a good opportunity to explore the fourth, but also the fifth house and that extraordinary transition, that threshold, the cusp between the fourth and the fifth house, where we all ultimately have to cross. It is the way that we leave behind the family of origin and we head off into the world and into the fifth. The fourth house is associated with the moon and the fifth associated with the sun, the fourth associated with Cancer and the fifth associated with Leo. So you can get a feel there of leaving behind the familiar, the safe, everything that we have come to know, everything that has shaped us, our role within the family unit, our roots of origin, and move into the fifth house of our creation, our expression, individuation, and truly becoming ourselves, including the play and the joy of being oneself. But then also there can be the shame of going away from the script of the family of origin as well. And so I've been searching around and looking for a fairy tale, and I landed back at Cinderella. But of course, a few moons ago, I did an episode on Cinderella that was related to the nodes of the moon and the journey between the south node and the north node and the back and forth dance that involved. I had one of the nodes as her time in the ashes by the hearth, one of the nodes as her time at the ball, and the movement in between as the hazel bush that she had planted at her mother's grave. And if you'd like to go back and listen to that one, I recommend it because it's one of my favorite stories. In fact, it's a story that I'll be bringing forth at the Living Astrologies Conference in Santa Fe in just a few short months' time. I'm looking forward to whoever's signed up for my workshops there. Looking forward to diving into that and exploring the nodes through that lens. But you can also hear within that story the transition from fourth to fifth. The fourth would be that time in the ashes by the hearth, and the fifth would be the ball, and maybe that threshold between the two would be likened to the hazel bush that is planted on mother's grave and that has magical things happen from it. The birds gather there and drop down golden jewels and dresses and shoes and all of those sorts of things. But then I thought, well, yes, Cinderella will work really well, but I'd also found another version of Cinderella. And this comes back to just how prominent in human cultures all over the world many of these fairy tales actually are. It's something that Jung referred to as the collective unconscious, and the archetypes that are embedded in human consciousness in his own experience and his phenomenological research had discovered in a way that these archetypes, they live in that layer of consciousness that's really in the collective dreaming layer, which he named the collective unconscious. And it was said that he thought the word unconscious was probably not the right word because it's anything but unconscious back there. But he had already named it the unconscious, which gave it a particular connotation as though it was somehow asleep or not active in the world. But he found that it's one of the most active layers in existence, far from unconscious as he had named it. But anyway, the point being that many stories that we know quite well have several different versions from all over the world, many, many different types of stories along the same basic theme. And so you could have the Russian version of these stories, or the Inuit version of the stories, or obviously there's the German or the English or South American tribes. And no matter where you go, despite these places not really being linked by trade routes or anything like that, the stories have somehow, almost like mycelium, almost like mushrooms, they have found their way into human consciousness from somewhere deep below. Because I guess these stories are our way of making meaning, and they're that important that they have to come up in many different forms. So today, rather than go back to the Germans, the Grimm Brothers version, I found another version of Cinderella that I feel is very relevant to this journey between the fourth and the fifth house. And it actually comes from the Algonquin peoples on the east coast of northern USA and Canada. In that region, there's a story called The Rough-Faced Girl, which is essentially the story of Cinderella. I'm going to move through the story here together so that we can get a feel of how this can maybe elaborate and illustrate and amplify and animate this journey between the fourth and the fifth. And interestingly enough, even the third house comes in here. So we make our way really through that base of the chart, through the nighttime journey that goes into the third and the fourth and the fifth in its own way. But we can definitely feel our time down in the roots of the chart. So the story opens out on the shores of a wide bay on the Atlantic coast, where there dwelt in old times a great warrior. And it was said that he had been one of Glooskap's best helpers and friends. And Glooskap was a bit like what we know as Hermes. He's a trickster god, and he helped to shape the earth, and he also helped to shape culture. This warrior was one of Glooskap's best helpers and friends, and he had done many wonderful deeds for him. But he had this particular power, and his power was that he could turn invisible. And this is what really drew me to this story for the fourth house. As Melanie told us a few times, that the I see down the bottom of the chart is the I can't see. This is our root structure that we are only barely familiar with. And the more we look down there, it may become even more mysterious, despite wanting to know and despite wanting to search the base of our systems and search our family structures. It's kind of like this place of concealment and revelation. And the fact that he can become invisible brings us to characters like Hades. Hades' great power is that his great tool is his helmet of invisibility that was made for him by Hephaestus, forged for him in the fire. And so he can go amongst the mortals unseen. So this character, whose name is Strong Wind, that's the warrior's name, is a bit like our Hades. You can feel that his place is in the underworld. And it makes us wonder about the fourth house. Is the fourth house a place of the underworld, as in it's underneath the chart? Generally, the eighth house is considered underworld as the place of death and renewal. But we can also have an argument for perhaps Hades being down here, working invisibly behind the scenes. This kind of a figure. He seems like he's a friend of the trickster. Of course, within Greek mythology, Hermes is also a guide of souls who can guide you down to the underworld. And then we have this theme of invisibility. But the fact that he is a great warrior, this character Strong Wind, who lived with his sister at a tent by the sea, his sister who helped him do his great deeds in the world. And of course, he had many suitors, many maidens wanted to marry him. And his sister sort of acted as the gatekeeper for these maidens. Strong Wind then used a clever trick to test the truthfulness of all who sought to win him. Each evening as the sun went down, his sister would walk on the beach, and any girl who wished to make the trial would walk next to them. And his sister could always see him, but no one else could see him. So as he came home from his work in the twilight, and his sister saw him drawing near, she would walk along the coast and ask the girl, "Do you see him?" And each girl would falsely answer yes. And so his sister would test them and ask, "Well, with what does he draw his sled?" And each girl would come up off the top of their heads with some kind of thing, maybe with the hide of a moose, or with a pole, or with a great cord. And then his sister would know that they all had lied, for their answers were clearly mere guesses. And again, these maidens tried, and again, they failed, because Strong Wind would not marry any who were untruthful. Now, in that same village, there lived a great chief who had 3 daughters. Their mother had long been dead, and one of these daughters was much younger than the others. She was very beautiful and gentle and well beloved by all. But for that very reason, her older sisters were terribly jealous of her charms and treated her very cruelly. They clothed her in rags that she might be ugly, and they cut off her long black hair, and they burnt her face with coals from the fire that she might be scarred and disfigured. And they lied to their father, telling him that she had done these things to herself. But the young girl was patient, and she kept her gentle heart and went gladly about her work. So we can really feel within this character, this is our Cinderella with the 2 sisters, only they're not stepsisters this time, they're her actual sisters. And she's been scarred. And she's been scarred and disfigured by the 4th house. She's been scarred and disfigured by her family of origin. And unlike Strong Wind's sister, who's an ally and a support, this girl, who's known as the rough-faced girl, was abused by her sisters and treated terribly poorly. And of course, her mother was gone, just like in our Cinderella, and her father was of no help and no support to her. And we can sort of feel her there, just going about her business. She's lost her outward beauty, and as such, she's tending only to the inner world. She's lost her long black hair, she's lost her face, she's lost her features that could draw her out into the world, and instead she just tends, in some ways she tends to the hearth, she stays close to the ashes, her face covered in soot. And this is that deep, quiet work that we're doing in the 4th house, as I mentioned, both in my conversation with Melanie and in my own solo episode. You know, this is the unglamorous house, the 4th house. It's where we're doing work that nobody's going to pat us on the back for, and nobody's going to give us an award. We won't be recognized for our work down here. But it is a place where we can establish ourselves. We can do the humble work. We can maybe sweep up those ashes and clean up and get a sense of our, where we came from and who we are and what we're really about. But it's arduous work, and it's hard work, and it's long work, and it's the sort of work that feels like it's never fully done. And we can feel that in our protagonist here, that she is busy doing that work. There's no real other work for her to do but that. There's also something of the 3rd house here as the house of siblings, and the support or the hindrance to the 4th house, and how those siblings can either be allies, like Strong Wind has the ally of his sister who helps him do his great deeds and even helps him to discover his mate and acts as gatekeeper for that, or the hindrance of the sisters who are effectively abusing rough-faced girl, making her feel worthless and empty because of their jealousy and their envy. So it's interesting, isn't it, how all of the houses, as you keep going around the zodiac and keep going around the wheel, you can feel that that there really is almost like a medicine wheel where each house is leading into the next house, and we can always go backwards and forwards within this house system. It's a little bit more fluid than the zodiac itself, I feel, the houses. This is where the idea of cusps come from, not from the zodiac itself, but from the houses, and this way that houses will blend from one into the next, and we can feel the seeds of one house go in to become the fruits of the next house. So it's interesting in this story how we have 2 different kinds of siblings, maybe describing ultimately the spectrum of one side to the other of what the sibling experience can be. So we pick back up our story again, and we're with those 2 sisters, the older sisters of Rough-Faced Girl. And of course, they want to win the hand of strong wind in marriage. And one evening, as the sun went down, they walked on the shore with strong wind's sister and waited for his coming. And soon he came from his day's work drawing his sled, and his sister asked as usual, "Do you see him?" And each one lying answered, "Yes." And she asked, "Of what is his shoulder strap made?" And each one guessing said, "It's made of raw hide." And then they entered the tent where they hoped to see strong wind eating his supper. And when he took off his coat and his moccasins, they could see them. But more than these, they saw nothing. And strong wind knew that they had lied, and he kept himself from their sight, and they went home dismayed. And one day, the chief's youngest daughter, with her rags and her burnt face, resolved to seek strong wind. This is a bit like our Cinderella, when she hears that the prince is coming to town, when she hears that there's a 3-day festival and the prince is looking for a bride. She also has that resolve. She just knows she has to be there. And it's like this with the rough-faced girl. So she patched up her clothes with little bits of birch bark from the trees, and she put a few of the little ornaments she possessed on herself. And she went forth to try to see the invisible one, as all the other girls in the village had done before. And her sisters, they laughed at her and called her a fool. And as she passed along the road, all the people laughed at her because of her tattered frock and her burnt face. But silently she went her way. Now I think we can feel here that resolve of rough-faced girl, as she is so used to this fourth house work that she's been doing. But she has that ability to suffer it silently and keep moving forward. And I think that's what we really require as we move between the fourth and the fifth, the ability to keep moving forward and keep moving essentially towards what is her destiny, which can be discovered, or the seeds of which can be discovered in that fifth house. So as she's walking along and her sisters are, calling her names, and everybody on the street is telling her, "What are you doing?" She continues on in silence anyway, because she knows that she has ultimately that date with destiny. She is coming up to the threshold of the fifth house. She's coming up to where her spirit is, where her pleasure might lie, where she might be drawn into the world through this house of ultimately individuation that is on offer. Strongwind's sister received the little girl kindly, and at twilight she took her to the beach, and soon Strongwind came drawing his sled, and his sister asked, "Do you see him?" And the girl answered, "No." And his sister wondered greatly, because she spoke the truth, unlike all of these other suitors, unlike all these other girls. And again she asked, "Do you see him now?" And the girl answered, "Yes, and he is very wonderful." And she asked, "With what does he draw his sled?" And the girl answered, "With the rainbow." And so the sister asked further, "Of what is his bowstring?" And the girl answered, "His bowstring is the Milky Way." And then Strongwind's sister knew that because the girl had spoken the truth at first, her brother had made himself visible to her. And she said, "Truly you have seen him." And she took her home and bathed her, and all the scars disappeared from her face and body, and her hair grew long and black again like the raven's wing, and she gave her fine clothes to wear and many rich ornaments. And then she gave her the wife's seat in the tent. And soon Strongwind entered and sat beside her and called her his bride. And the very next day she became his wife, and ever afterwards she helped him to do great deeds. So here, rough-faced girl, she has to be honest. And she's the first one that has been honest. Everybody else has tried the performance and tried the lie and tried to just make it up, and tried to come up with something. And she doesn't attempt that. And maybe that's the humility that she's learned in the fourth house, as she spent all of that time by the ashes, all of that time tending to the hearth, that she doesn't see the necessity or doesn't see the need for lies. And it's a bit of a fifth house theme, as we'll head into in the next month, of the truthfulness and the lies, the performative side of the fifth house on the one hand, and the ability to really stand into our deep truth on the other. And it is only this humble girl, the youngest maiden, that is able to really approach it much like the third sibling in many of our fairy tales, where she approaches with humility and grace and does something different to all of the rest. Now, the girl's two elder sisters were very cross, and they wondered greatly at what had taken place, but Strong Wind, who knew of their cruelty, resolved to punish them. Using his great power, he changed them both into aspen trees and rooted them in the earth. And since that day, the leaves of the aspen have always trembled, and they shiver in fear at the approach of Strong Wind. It matters not how softly he comes, for they are still mindful of his great power and anger because of their lies and their cruelty to their sister long ago. In some ways, we can feel in this story that the rough-faced girl has actually been married to the truth. She has found her way through life, and she has come back in a deep alignment with who she truly is. And the more I thought about this story, the more I've seen really all of the houses we've had so far show up. In the first house, that's your persona, and the rough-faced girl is her persona, which is the mask that we wear on our face. That's taken from her by her sisters. She's given a burnt face, so she has no mask in which to interact with the world. She has no persona to speak of. And then we move from there into the second house, and obviously with her hair cut short and all in tatters and rags, she has none of those material possessions. In fact, even when she puts on her adornments, there's just a few small things that she has. She's basically in rags. And so she has none of those possessions, and her sense of self-worth is really at that point probably ruled over by her sister's taunts and even the taunts of those in the neighborhood. And obviously her father has not come to protect her from any of that. Then obviously the third house, that's pretty easy to see the siblings and sibling dynamics, which for her are the worst we could possibly get, the two evil sisters. And we come into the fourth of her family of origin, and her roots and her root structure and her root system. She's lost her mother, and there's no one that has been able to come to save her. And so that's where she is, really in the ashes by the hearth, in the deepest, darkest parts of that fourth house. And then ultimately, she makes her way out of that situation by truth speaking and by individuating and by becoming herself. And that's how she's healed. She's healed of the scars. She's healed of those tatters that she's in. She's healed of those rags. Her hair grows back like the raven's wing, grows back to lovely, luscious hair. And she comes fully back to life. It's like she's received the vitality that's on offer when we really get in touch with who we really are. This is our rough-faced girl. She's made it all the way through her journey and her trials, and has come back into life, come back into the life force that is available for her once she's crossed the threshold. I guess the only other thing to talk about there is that what is it that is actually held by Strong Wind? He pulls his sled not with any of these earthy things, but with something quite ethereal, with the rainbow. And his bowstring is made of the Milky Way itself. So we can get the sense of this ethereal nature. It's almost like by going through all of these trials, she has come into touch with the very makings of the cosmos itself. It's like she's come into, perhaps even we could say, what the deepest reality of astrology is to come really into who we truly are as individuals, that incorporates all parts of ourself. And perhaps that's that rainbow, the many different colors of the self, and the Milky Way as that entire landscape that the zodiac lives on, or our wheel, our medicine wheel, our zodiac, our circle of animals lives within that. So she sees now who he really is, and in turn sees who she really is. as the wife of great wind and as someone with a calling and a passion and something she can really dedicate her life towards. And as such, that is her redemption, and that is her salvation, and that is her coming into who she truly is in this life. So yes, that is the story of the rough-faced girl. The story comes from a book called Cinderella, the Ultimate Collection, and I'll put a link in the show notes to that. It's 29 different versions of Cinderella coming from all over the world, and it gives us that sense of what I talked about earlier in the podcast of the collective unconscious and how it sprouts up in many different forms, the same basic storylines. They just apparently have to be told through human consciousness. So thanks a lot for listening in to this episode. I hope that helped you get a deeper sense of the fourth, but not just that, but all of the houses that surround that, including the fifth and the third before it, and even back into the first and second as we go. And yeah, we'll be going from here into the fifth house. I'll be doing an episode on the fifth shortly. And then I'll be joined with a dear friend. Her name is Vive Oldham. She is currently putting together an incredible summit on pleasure, and I thought she would be the ideal person to talk to for the fifth house. And not only that, but my fifth house episode will be my 100th episode, so it will have a celebratory tone to it. I hope you can join me for that one. And the next episode, which will be just on the fifth, it's the house of play, individuation, becoming oneself, pleasure, enjoyment, and everything else that goes on in that realm of consciousness. Look forward to seeing you then. Thank you for listening to On the Soul's Terms podcast. To support the show, please consider leaving a 5-star review, sharing with friends, or becoming a patron at patreon.com/onthesoulsterms. Until next time.